If the thought of Jeff Bezos running our election system in America scares the bejesus out of you, you're not alone. According to new reports, Amazon has now taken over most of our voting systems. I have Farron Cousins from the Trial Lawyer magazine with me now to explain what's happening. Farron, you've been on this Amazon case for years, warning us about how dangerous this is when we have an entity where there are no antitrust laws that seem to be able to close them down. There's no regulations that close them down or keep them from expanding into all parts of our lives. And now, this is pretty scary stuff. Now they're messing with our right to vote. Tell me, lay the story out for me a little bit.
Well, what's happening right now is apparently over the last couple years, and this has been done relatively quietly, Amazon Web Services, AWS they call it, they have absolutely taken over 40 different states' voting security, which means not only do they house the results on election night, they house the voting rolls, the voter registration information, everything in any given one of those 40 states that has to do with the voters, everything from the results to the registrations and anything in between. So Amazon itself, Jeff Bezos, CEO, is sitting there on all of our information, including the results of federal, national, state, and local elections.
Let me remind you about a story that we did. It was on Capital One, where the system was hacked, and I don't remember exactly the numbers. Is something like 100 million people were affected by that hack. This was part of the Amazon program too.
Right.
Okay, so somebody, and this was a rogue employee. Now, so here you have everything's in the cloud. And right now, I think the numbers like they control almost 35% of all the cloud computing business right now. So now they're moving in elections. We know that they've failed miserably, not just one time, but a couple of times, failed miserably. And now we're saying we want you to keep up with all this information about voting.
And what's really suspicious about this to me is the fact that a lot of states already had outsourced this cloud computing for the election services, and they were paying thousands of dollars for the service. And Amazon came in, and in some of these states, South Carolina specifically, they said, we'll charge you less than $100 a year to house this information.
Talk about why that is. That's the come on, isn't it?
Right, and there is no way Amazon's profiting off of less than $100 a year. So there's another reason.
And what is it?
Well, I think it's obvious. We know that Amazon doesn't want anybody to come in and put regulations on them.
Right.
We know that Amazon, they've got an axe to grind with Bernie. They've got an axe to grind with Donald Trump. And if they control the information, they absolutely could, and I don't want to sound conspiracyist here, but they could come in there.
There's nothing conspiracy about this. It's about that, and it's about money.
Right.
Okay, you control information, you control dollars. Obviously, they lost huge money by saying to these entities, we're only going to charge you $100. What are they really after? They're after partial Social Security numbers. They're after date of birth. They're after all of this information that we don't want out there. And so all of a sudden they control all that. They even have the signature. They have the duplicate of the signature, the handwritten signature that they have in the cloud, and they can call on any time. And who do they sell it to? They sell it to people who are marketing to us. That's where the money comes in. Yeah. The other part of the story, I think you hit it right on the head. When you control that kind of information, you're powerful. You can pose a threat to your enemies. And so I think this is where it's going. As a matter of fact, we see Google doing the same thing, don't we? I mean, it's the same thing. Gain information, control that information, and you're not only a political threat, but you're in the business of making big money.
Well, and when you think about the fact that, like the Capital One hack you mentioned, that was from somebody at AWS.
Right.
So suppose you get an AWS employee that's far left or far right, whatever it is, they want to screw with election results. They can do that now. And that's what happens when you have this privatized entity.
In Mexico right now, they control for the entire country, they control the entire information on the voter database. That's real scary stuff. In a landmark victory for marijuana reform, the House of Representatives has passed the Secure, Fair Enforcement Banking Act. While the debate over marijuana legalization has flooded state legislators, this banking bill's passage could be paving the way for future federal reforms, we hope. Legal journalist Molly Barrows joins us now to talk about that. Molly, when was this bill introduced, and does it seem to be moving at a decent rate?
It does, when so little moves with bipartisan support in Congress. Now, this one really has a lot of support. So it was proposed in March, and it's moving right along. The House just passed it recently, in fact, and it was proposed by a congressman out of Colorado. And it's basically a law. If it's made law, it will protect any businesses that work with cannabis. It will enable them to be able to work safely with banking institutions, and it will keep these banking institutions from being open to prosecution, any kind of criminal prosecution for doing business with them, because as you know, it's still illegal federally, but we have 33 states and counting, plus the District of Columbia that have legalized it for state use and individual use. So this is what it's meant to do. There's so much money being made, and basically Congress is saying this isn't about, or the House anyway, this isn't about marijuana, this is about banking, and these banking institutions are asking for this. So let's give it to them.
Anytime you talk to Congress about banking or Wall Street, they're always going to be favorable.
Yes.
Full disclosure, as I tell this story, Charlotte's Web is something that I own a fair amount of, okay? And so I want to tell you that the problem is when a state says, we're going to legalize this, and then they don't have anything that they can do with the money. Everything's cash. Their credit cards.
That's right.
There's some companies that have moved into that space, but it's not broad enough. How has cannabis industry, have they been operating without banking's help?
You said it. It's a lot of cash. It's individual niche businesses that help them problem solve, help them find financiers, if you will. Sometimes it's overseas banks or institutions that are more comfortable with it. Sometimes it's credit unions or locally owned banks, state banks that aren't underneath the same pressures or feeling the same constraints as maybe a national banking institution.
Yeah,
so it's more the individuals.
I got to tell this story because it's to me it puts it in perspective. HSBC,
yes.
We did this story
yes.
on them laundering money for terrorists. Okay?
Well,
and they actually admitted it. Yes, we laundered money for terrorists,
right.
and human life was taken. Americans were killed because of our laundering money for terrorists. That's an institution that says, we can't do this, though. We certainly can't get involved with marijuana. What's your reaction to this? Isn't this kind of the norm?
Money, money, money.
Yeah,
I think they finally got support from the Republicans because Democrats have typically been on board with this. They've typically been supportive of marijuana as an alternative for medicinal treatment, as well as a business, proposition. And I think finally you've got the banking institution as a whole on board with legalizing this because there's so much money to be made. And that's where you're getting the support from the Republicans because they are worried, again, going back to that far right stance of maybe offending some of their more conservative or religious constituents, if you will, who may see something wrong because it's still illegal federally, but they want to move forward because they see a chance to make it about banking and not about marijuana. So that's why it went through the House.
Yeah, so where were these religious conservatives when HSBC raised their right hand and said, yes, we have taken in money from terrorists.
That's right.
We knew what we were doing. We understood it was being used to kill American soldiers over in Iraq.
Hypocritical.
And we did it anyway in Afghanistan. And it wasn't just HSBC, by the way. So, okay, does this, let's look at this. If this bill passes, doesn't it also create a trend where more states say, yeah, we're comfortable legalizing this because the federal government finally has shown some leadership and said banking can be involved? Yes,
and I think there's a lot that's at stake here. I mean, first of all, we don't know how well it's going to do in the Senate, but so far reports indicate that they're going to green light that. The fellow from Idaho who is in charge of the Senate Banking Committee, he said that he is definitely going to move it forward. Their version may not look exactly like the House's version, but they do want to take it up. You have Marco Rubio saying, while I may not agree with legalizing marijuana as a whole, I do agree with basically giving banks the green light to go ahead and control it financially so that they have some control. So that, to me, seems to be the heart of it. Whether Rubio meant to say it or not, he was basically saying, we want to put our hands in that cookie jar. By golly, this is how we're going to do
Rubio's,
it. And still feel good about ourselves, you know?
Well, Rand Paul, what I love to see, Rand Paul is libertarian, and he says, look, well, let's own up to where this American culture is. Legalized marijuana is a reality. At least for medical use, most people are going to go with that. It's a reality. So let's jump in and own up to reality. Thank you for joining me. Okay.
Thanks, Pat.
Yeah.
Every year, 1 million hernia surgeries are performed in the United States. Unfortunately, some mesh implants that are used in these surgeries have caused complications, including infection and organ damage that led to surgeries to correct those problems. If this has happened to you, learn more about the hernia mesh lawsuit by going online to hernia.law or call us for a free consultation about your legal rights.